The formation of sedimentary rock. Woo! Notice we used the sedimentary rock to set that up. This is a limestone sedimentary rock that I found out in the parking lot when I got here. I was like, oh, I need a rock for this, so I just picked this one up because here in Central Texas where we live, almost all of our rocks are sedimentary rocks. Yeah. Yeah. Sedimentary rocks are formed when other rocks get broken down. We call that weathering. Wind, water, and ice. Remember, ice weathers by getting in the cracks and expanding when it freezes. It'll split anything in half. Weathering is just the breaking down of a larger piece into smaller pieces. Eventually, the pieces get as small as this, as the sand. Okay, we talked about that at the table. Eventually, this rock will break down into nothing but a pile of sand. All right? When water runs over a material, it takes little pieces of it with it. When it freezes, little pieces of it break off. When the wind blows, maybe blowing other sediment against it, little bits of it get chipped off and broken off. That's weathering. That weathered material falls to the ground. Okay? And then eventually what happens? Wait. Shh. Hello?
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 Good morning. My name is Tessa, and I'm calling on a recording.
Happy birthday to you! Happy birthday to you!
We're a little busy right now. Okay, fortunately this is our video. We can cut in and out as we want. Alright, so our weathered material is now all on the ground. Okay, our weathered rock, alright, is formed into sediment. That sediment falls to the ground and always settles to the lowest spot. Alright, if it's in water, it sinks to the bottom. Okay, if it's on a hill, it'll get pushed downhill. All right, it gets pushed and settled by erosion. Erosion moves the material. All right, as rock breaks down into sediment, as it gets weathered down into sediment, that material then gets moved somehow. That's what we call erosion. Second step. That eroded material gets transported somewhere. Let's imagine that it gets into a river and it's going along in the water. It's spinning along, and eventually, remember when we did the delta, it gets to a slow point. Maybe it goes in the river and gets to a bend in the river where the river turns or gets wider. Well, as the water slows down, that sediment isn't being spun along as much. It's heavier than water. It settles to the bottom. Okay? It settles to the bottom, and then it sets down at the bottom of the pond, lake, delta, ditch, wherever. That's called deposition. Step 3. Okay? It doesn't just happen to one piece of sand, one piece of sediment. It happens to all of those pieces of sediment. So what happens is an area starts to collect a lot of deposition. Okay? More and more sediment gets deposited there. More and more gets deposited there. More and more. And just like we talked about in class, if Damien is there on the ground, he's a piece of sediment, and then Gunner is another sediment, falls on top of Damien, okay, then, that's right, then we're all sediment, we all come over here and we all fall on top of Damien. He's starting to get pretty packed down there at the bottom of the pot. A lot of compaction happening there, alright? If we all got on top of him, he'd be super compacted. The more sediment falls, the more deposition happens there, the more compaction there is. All right? It gets heavier and heavier down at the bottom. All of that material starts to get squeezed together. As it gets tighter and tighter down there, it also gets hotter. Think of it like blankets. You've got a blanket. You put one on you. Then you put 2 on you. Then 3, then 4, then 20 blankets. At 20 blankets, it's kind of heavy. You can hardly move under there, and it's really hot. At 100 blankets, you can't move at all, and it's really hot. How about at 1,000 blankets? So now you're super smashed in there, and it's really hot. Now we're talking about getting ready for some cementation. Okay? The compaction is the adding of more and more sediment getting deposited there. All right? Step 4 is compaction. Step 5 is the cementation. When enough of it is compacted together, it starts to become one piece. Those pieces of rock that were weathered, eroded, deposited, compacted, become cemented together to form sedimentary rock. That's what they form. So that describes the formation of sedimentary rock. It happens over and over. Then that same piece of sedimentary rock will somehow get moved back to the surface, changing earth, changing weather. Now all of a sudden, it starts to get weathered again, starts to become more sediment, starts to break down, gets eroded off, gets deposited, gets compacted, gets cemented. It'll go over and over and over. Rock becomes sedimentary rock. That's how it works. All right? But it's not always just rock that's getting compacted in there. Because if we're talking about a river, there's all kinds of living stuff in a river. There's plants, there's animals, and mostly plants. All right? There's a lot of plants that get deposited. When plants die, they settle also to the bottom. See? Just like Caitlin's busting them up over here in little piles. Over here, we got a pretty good pile of leaves. All right? As those leaves fall, they get mixed in with some other sediment, and they start to settle in the same place. They start to get deposited in the same place that the sedimentary rock is formed. And they all start to get compaction as well. More and more organic material, more and more dead things are getting deposited there and getting smashed in with the sediment. So we know that the sediment reforms into a sedimentary rock. But you know what doesn't form into a sedimentary rock? Is dead stuff. Dead leaves don't make rock. They don't become rock. They get compacted under there and they change, but not into rock. They're not a mineral. They'll never be a rock. What they form into is to fossil fuels. That's right. Because that carbon that's in them becomes those fossil fuels. As they get compacted, they get squeezed together, they start to become, the sediment starts to become cemented. While the sediment is becoming cemented, that organic material, all of those living organisms, are starting to become fossil fuels. If it happens on dry land, if it happens at the bottom of a mountain, and there's a lot of sediment building up there from erosion, washing material, weathered material down the hill, and it's all compacted, and there's a lot of organic material getting mixed in, then it forms coal. Coal forms coal. The same formation happens underwater. We were talking about a river or a river bed or in the swamp where all of that organic material is getting compacted. It doesn't form sedimentary rock, it's going to form coal unless it's underwater. If it's underwater where it's forming, then it's going to form oil. Think about what coal is. Coal is a hard black rock. We take it, we burn it, it's very flammable, it burns, it produces heat, it releases energy. Oil is a liquid. Basically, it's a liquid rock. It's liquid coal is all it is. You add a little water to it, it's all forming, and it becomes oil and not coal. Formation of fossil fuels. Now, if our organic material somehow gets covered up before it fully rots out, before it fully decomposes, there's our decomposition right there. If our organic material rots out before, or gets covered up before decomposition happens, then it's still got a lot left in it, and it's still got to rot, and it's going to rot underground. But compaction's already happening. So now it's rotting underground where it's trapped. When it's trapped underground like that, that rotting material starts to release a gas. Okay? You ever smell a dead animal on the side of the road or something? They stink awful, right? Well, the smell that you're smelling is the gas being released from those cells as they decompose. As they decay and rot, they're releasing gases. When that gas is trapped underground, that's when it becomes natural gas.
Is that how you become a skeleton when you die?
Decomposing and rotting, sure. Decomposing and decay. Yeah. Okay. So does that help to see how fossil fuels are formed?
Yeah.
They're formed very much like sedimentary rock. Okay. So if we're looking for fossil fuels, where are we going to find them?
At the bottom of the ocean.
Under sedimentary rocks. That's where we find them, huh? Usually, if we're looking for oil, usually in an ocean or swamp. If we're looking for coal, probably by the bottom of a mountain or at the edge of a mountain somewhere. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think we're good. Did we get it all? Mm-hmm. Did we cover everything? Y'all have any questions about it?
No.
All right. Cut.